Hello and welcome to the fifth video in my Storytime Dungeons Dragons past. Today we're going to talk about funny stories from basically the first serious campaign I had, the one that lasted longer than anyone I had done. It was my first serious campaign where they played for a while, multiple sessions, multiple funny stories. So to start off, we're going to talk about how this is before, I think Miney was away, the Manakee was away. So it was just Manny and Tanner, and they were trying to figure out, what to do. So they went to a nightclub, and they decided they were going to try and pickpocket people. I don't think either of them was a rogue, but they wanted to. And I was like, okay, yeah, sure, that'd be fun. So they go and they pickpocket a guy, and they get a ring, just a simple ring. They get a simple ring from his pocket, and they're like, this is great. And then the bouncer shows up, and they run to the bathroom, and they hide in a stall. And I'm thinking, at this point, this is all off the top of my head because I hadn't prepared for this. And I'm thinking, well, what is this ring? What is it going to do? And I was like, the guy they pickpocketed is a rich wizard, and the ring is cursed. So I'm thinking, yes, if they put it on, something bad will happen. So they're in the stall. The bouncer is checking each stall, and they're panicking. They don't want to get caught with the stolen ring. So they're like, well, Tanner's like, I'll just eat it. And I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. And then Manny's like, no, don't do that. Just hide it. Bouncer finds him, kicks him out of the club. All's good. They go to sell the ring. They find a merchant, and the merchant I had him roll for it, and I set an easy limit, but he rolled, failed, and couldn't tell if the ring was cursed. So they're like, okay, we'll sell it to you for 200 gold. He buys it. He thinks it's something special. He slips it on his finger. Bam, he turns into a coin and hits the floor. And they're both like, oh, it's a good thing we didn't put that ring on or try and eat it. And that's one of the first funny stories, but that leads into the next part where they decided they wanted to burglarize a local manor. I can't remember how it came up. I think Manny actually was a rogue. So pickpocketing makes sense. Because, yeah, now that I think about it, he was part of a thieves guild. So he decides he wants to rob from this rich guy's house. They break in. There's all these traps. They keep getting hit by things. They're doing fine. And then the guy shows up. And I'm like, I want something cool. I want something fun for them to fight. He's a werewolf. Oh no. So they fight the werewolf. Tanner gets bitten, rolls poorly, and unfortunately is inflicted with lycanthropy. He doesn't know it, obviously, at the time. No, I think I did. I'm still new to this. So rather than, I know the rule is if they're bitten, you don't have to tell them if they've contracted lycanthropy. I don't think you're supposed to tell them. They're supposed to figure it out. But he got bit. He contracted it. And this is where the story gets interesting. Manny's like, I'll take you to my thieves guild. I think they beat the werewolf. They kill it. But Manny's like, I'm going to take you to my thieves guild. They'll know how to cure you. They show up. He explains, yeah, my buddy's a werewolf. Can you guys cure him? And I decided to pull from the monster manual the assassin. So they're high level, and they're like, okay, yeah, we can cure him, and they're lying. Of course, Manny doesn't trust them, so he's like, I'll insight. He rolled poorly, I rolled great. He thinks, okay, they're going to help my buddy. That's all that matters. That's not what ended up happening. What ends up happening is they take Tanner, ship him off to an island somewhere to fight in gladiatory combat. And that worked out because Tanner wasn't able to play for a while. So after that, it's Manny and Miney. And they're gallivanting around. They're looking for Tanner. Their whole goal at this point becomes save Tanner, the werewolf, from wherever he is. They don't know where he is. But along that, in the middle of that, since he can't play, they know that it's not going to rectify itself quite so easily. So they're doing other things on the side. And one of the things they do is they go to a gladiatorial combat. They join up to a coliseum in a big city, and they're like, we're going to win the grand prize, use the money, all that. I, at this point, had put in an NPC of level 20 just as a guide. She wasn't a player. She wasn't a DMPC. She was just an NPC who would guide them, like, oh, go do this, or oh, go do that. She enters the competition. They end up fighting. Manny and Miney end up fighting at one point. And I had mapped it all out. I had like a whole coliseum with traps and underground tunnels, and they were fighting each other. It was Manakete versus Rogue. It was getting really close, and then Miney won, and he continued on. Manny dropped out of the combat. He was out of the contest. So then Miney fights the NPC, and I'm thinking there's no way he's gonna win. She's level 20. It's supposed to be scripted. She's gonna win, get the prize, and give it to them. That's not what happened. You see, Miney took Charm Person. He charms her. She rolls and fails. He tells her to give up so he can win. And she does. She gives up and he wins and continues on in the contest. Then at that point I was stuck because I wanted her to win. So I was like, okay, what am I going to do? I'll give him a difficult fight. Not impossible, but a one-on-one fight. I think it was with a gladiator. Like the Monster Manual gladiator. And I'm like, okay, he'll fight the gladiator. And if he wins, he gets the prize. And if he loses, the gladiator gets it and he loses out. It's, fair is fair. He charms him. Charm Person once again. He fails. And the guy gives up. And so Miney, with Charm Person, completely bested my plans and got the item that was supposed to be a really powerful relic. It was if I recall, I still use it every now and then. It's a sheath. You put your blade in, and it charges it with electricity. You get 3 charges where you add like a D6 lightning to the attack, or you can expend all 3 charges and cast Lightning Bolt. So he gets that, and that comes up later. I'm only bringing that up because it comes back later. But they get that. And at this point, Tanner's back. So I'm thinking, okay, well, Tanner's off on his own. I'll do a one-on-one session with him and try and keep him involved. I don't want to just have him sit idly by while they try and rescue him. So he wakes up on a ship as a werewolf. I think I'd made it so the assassins gave him some magical chemicals or whatever that made him permanently a werewolf, just so he'd have a better fighting chance, because they stripped him of all his gear. So he's on the ship. He makes friends with another captive. They escape. That's where that ends. Tanner stopped playing at that point. So it goes back to Miney and Manuel, who Tanner's gone, but they're still trying to rescue him. So they hire a ship to go to the island that he's supposed to go to, that they gathered all this intel on. They're on the ship. They encounter harpies, and the harpies basically sing their song. The ship crashes in the rocks. They disembark, fight the harpies, and then I'm like, okay, session over. The next session, I'm like, you know what? I want a dungeon. I want something for them to explore. So I made a dungeon with traps, monsters, NPCs, all that. They go in, and I still don't know how he did this. They go in, and in the first room, there's a woman in rags, sleeping, or not sleeping, she's awake, but she's been living in the entrance to the dungeon. And she's a werewolf. I don't tell them this. I don't say anything about this. Manny sits there and goes, she's a werewolf, isn't she? And I'm like, how did he guess that? There's no way. He couldn't have looked at my notes because we're playing our Xbox game chat, party chat. I'm like, how could he know that? And it's still to this day, Manny was the one person who could always figure out my tricks. He'd always figure out what I had planned next. And I have no idea how he did it. It's still mind-boggling to me, but it was one of the funniest things that ever happened when he goes, she's a werewolf, isn't she? And I'm just like, she admits she's a werewolf. But the next funny thing that happened is they walk into a room, they're stealthing, and they come across a giant phase spider. They don't know it's a phase spider, though. I just say, oh, it's a giant spider. Miney, seeing that the woman in the front was, the woman at the beginning of the dungeon was friendly, decides, well, maybe this spider's friendly. So what does he do? He walks in, no weapons drawn, walks in, and in every language he knew, which was Draconic, Elvish, and no, not Elvish, Draconic and 2 others, he says hello. It's a phase spider. It's not going to be friendly. So it bamps out, bamps behind him, bites him. They get into combat. Miney takes that new scabbard I gave him, takes out his longsword, fires a lightning bolt, fries the thing in one turn. Which is great. And I love that. And they continued to the dungeon. I think they fought a griffin. They eventually found a doorway with they found a doorway in the middle of the dungeon that was like the magic and all that, and inside was a princess. They saved her. Turns out the princess, they don't know this, but I know this. The princess is an Oni. She ends up continuing through is that something else? This has been so long, but basically they clear that dungeon. And I think that was the second to last session. The session after that is when everything went to hell. They were overpowered. I had given them all these magical items. They had done a lot. This is just the highlights, but they had done a lot. They had gotten all these magical items. I believe after they got out of the dungeon, they encountered the NPC who he beat in the gladiator combat. She gave him a scythe that sucked up blood, another homebrew thing I came up with. They encountered a ship of mimics, but in the end, the campaign kind of fizzled out because I had made them too overpowered. I gave them all these homebrew magic items. Every combat encounter I gave them, they trounced. There was no contest. So at that point, I was like, okay, we're going to start over. And they were fine with that. And in fact, Miney had been enjoying D&D so much, he didn't want to play exclusively a Manakete anymore. So he made up another character, completely different. I don't remember what it was. And then from then on, there's more stories. I'll tell them, as time goes on. But after that, that campaign ended. There's a lot of things in it that I took and kept, like the NPCs in the world, the powerful heroes, level 20s, big people that are impactful in the world were called saints. I kept that. I kept that scabbard. I kept a lot of magic items, and I kept them in a little notebook, which is now lost to the ages, lost to the wind, whatever. But I kept a lot of that. And I look back on it fondly, and I'm like, there's a lot of homebrew I did. There's a lot of things I did wrong. There's a lot of things I did great. But in the end, I had fun, and they had fun. And I look back on that fondly. And I wish, you go back and you're like, I wish I could go back to those times. But as it stands, I got to focus on current campaigns. Sadly, I don't play with them in D&D anymore. It's my own fault. I started going to school. I started playing Xbox less and less, and we just kind of drifted apart. So I don't play with them anymore. If they showed interest in playing again, I'd be happy to, but I don't think they are interested anymore. But that's it for that. So for, I guess, this comment, leave in the comments a story from a campaign that you loved, even if it was a bad campaign, just something you look back on fondly and you're like, that campaign may not have been great, but this moment was fantastic. And leave it in the comments, so thanks for watching.